So it is Sunday, June 18th, and we are back in Howell. It's a quick update, but as you'll notice, our tree hive has finally been moved. It only took us over a year, so we did move them. Over here you will see that there's a landing board blocking the entrance, forcing reorientation flights. So that's what's going on right there. But we came back down to Howell because if you've watched the previous video about Howell, we had brood nests that were just plugged up. We had virgin queens going out to get mated. So there's 4 weeks of no brood. In that 4 weeks, the honey flow was very strong and plugged up the brood nest. So when the queens came back, there was nowhere to lay. So what we did is we moved some of these deep boxes, so like right here, we moved that deep box above the excluder and then put a bunch of blank foundation in the deep box under the excluder, which worked perfectly. So they have drawn all of that out, and the queen has established her nest in that box and has actually used up some resources in the bottom deep, and the nest is now extending down into that deep as well. So the nests have been opened up. We also finished extraction, so we have some boxes to utilize again in case it comes to that. So we extracted about 500 pounds of honey, about 10 5-gallon buckets worth, and as you can see there's still a bunch of supers remaining. So these didn't have fully capped frames, so we left them on there. We know we're gonna have to do another extraction later in the fall, so if it wasn't capped and ready to go, we just left them on. So there's still a buttload of honey that's yet to be extracted, and you all know how I feel about honey extraction. I hate it. So, but it's a good problem to have, I suppose. Another thing that was interesting is, if you remember, we had a couple colonies. We had one back in this row, and then we had two up in this row that we put supers on. Well, actually we put a nuke at the top, and we isolated the queen in a queen excluder at the very top, and that was just to protect her as she took over that colony that we thought was queenless. Well, this weekend when we went back into them, we found that not only was there a queen up top, but there was also a queen down here as well, and that happened 2 out of those 3 colonies. And we waited 4 weeks before we went back in and checked for brood, and the queens in those 2 instances were not laying. So we pulled queens on May 6th, and we checked queen rightness on June 4th, and in that time they still had not started laying. So for those people that reach out to us and say, hey, I haven't seen a queen, haven't seen eggs in 2 weeks, I need a queen, you got to be patient. Sometimes it takes 4 weeks, sometimes it takes 5 weeks. It can take up to 6 weeks to see some eggs. So those were 2 instances where we thought that they were completely queenless, and we were wrong. So that's why we have more colonies down here now. There was a couple that we opened up the brood nest on that we were uncertain about. They ended up being queenless, so we just shook them out. They weren't laying workers or anything, but as you can tell, we're running out of space down here, and it takes a while to run through all these colonies. So we're trying to reduce the number of colonies down here in Howell. We'd like to get down to 20, and we're at 25. Right now too, we have some turkeys out in the field. The deer were out here in the morning while we were drinking coffee, watching the bees wake up. The deer were back there, and now the turkeys. So it's just a beautiful day here in Howell. The sun is just setting, and overall, very successful, productive weekend. Going back home with 500 pounds of honey. Gonna have to start bottling. So that's what we'll be doing this week. That's your update. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.